Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into a topic that I think a lot of people have probably asked themselves at some point. Um, can you achieve the 0% tax bracket in retirement, even if you have a pension? You know, we'll be looking at excerpts from that Retirement Tax Strategies book that you shared with me. And I got to say, it's got some pretty interesting stuff in there.
Yeah, it's definitely something to think about, especially if you're just starting to plan for retirement.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people don't realize how much their pension could impact their taxes later on.
Right, right. So let's jump right in.
Okay.
The book basically breaks it down into two main scenarios, right? So it's all about the size of your pension
Yeah.
compared to the standard deduction.
Yeah.
And that comparison, from what I'm reading here, it really sets the stage for like your entire tax strategy in retirement, So maybe we should start by breaking down each of those scenarios.
Okay. Sounds good. So, first of all, we need to remember that pensions, even though they are a great source of reliable income, they do add a layer of complexity when it comes to tax planning.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And it all comes down to the fact that they are considered, taxable income.
Right.
Which could bump you into a higher tax bracket if you're not careful.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So let's start with the first scenario then, where your pension is actually less than the standard deduction. Now, you might think, oh, well, if I have a pension, I'm automatically going to be paying taxes.
Right, yeah.
But the book actually highlights that might not necessarily be true.
No, not necessarily. What's interesting here is that you can still be in that 0% tax bracket, even with a pension, as long as it falls below that standard deduction amount. So, for example, the book gives us an example here where someone has a $10,000 annual pension. And let's say the standard deduction at that time is around, $37,000. They adjust it for inflation. Since the pension is less than the deduction, they wouldn't actually be taxed on it.
Okay. So in that case, you're essentially getting that pension income tax-free,
Right.
at least for federal taxes.
Right.
But I'm curious, is there anything you need to be doing, before retirement to kind of set yourself up for that scenario to really take advantage of that?
Oh, absolutely. This is where pre-retirement planning becomes super, super important.
Yeah.
So if you find yourself in that situation, it's really all about shifting assets to tax-free buckets like a Roth IRA, before you retire.
Exactly.
So it's kind of like securing those dollars in a place where they can potentially grow without facing those taxes later on.
I see. So even though my pension might not be taxed now, you're saying there's a chance it could be later, and a Roth IRA would kind of protect me from that.
It's not so much that your pension would be taxed later, but more about managing your overall tax liability in retirement.
Yeah.
However, there is one important thing to keep in mind. The book mentions this: Social Security taxation.
Oh, right. Social Security.
Even if you have a small pension, you still need to be aware of something called provisional income. And this could potentially trigger taxes on your Social Security benefits, even if your pension is below that standard deduction.
Okay, I've heard of provisional income before,
Right?
but I got to be honest, I'm a little fuzzy on the details.
Yeah.
Can you kind of like break that down for me? How does that all factor in here?
Sure. So basically, provisional income, it includes your pension plus half of your Social Security benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And if that combined amount, if it exceeds certain thresholds, then a portion of your Social Security benefits, they can be taxed.
Okay,
Even if, like we said, your pension itself is less than that standard deduction.
got it. So it's not just about the pension by itself.
Right.
It's like the pensions and Social Security together.
Yeah, it's this whole interplay between the two.
This provisional income calculation. Yeah. Okay, so that's a lot to consider for folks with smaller pensions.
Right.
But what about if your pension is larger than the standard deduction? Does the book talk about that?
Yeah, it does. And it pretty much says that in that scenario, the 0% tax bracket, it becomes mathematically impossible. Once you go over that standard deduction, any extra income is going to be taxable.
Right, because you've already used up all your deductions with the pension itself.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's almost like you hit this tipping point.
Right.
As soon as you cross that threshold, you're entering a whole new, tax landscape.
Mm-hmm.
And the source points out this is where understanding that provisional income, that becomes even more important.
Exactly.
Right.
And to illustrate this, they use an example of someone with, let's say, an $80,000 pension and then another $40,000 in Social Security benefits.
Okay.
So combined, they have a provisional income of $100,000. And that puts them right into that 22% tax bracket potentially.
Wow, that's a big jump.
It is, yeah.
So even if you're in a lower tax bracket now,
Yeah.
before retirement, when you combine a large pension with Social Security, it could bump you up significantly.
Yeah, and it could even be higher if tax rates go up in the future. You never know.
Right, exactly. That's a key takeaway for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, it really shows how important it is to plan ahead,
Yeah, definitely.
thinking about these things. Okay, so that's all kind of hypothetical. Are there any real-world examples in the book that kind of bring these concepts to life?
Yeah, actually, there's a case study that I think is really helpful.
Okay, let's hear it.
It's about a couple, Steve and Jennifer Johnson,
Okay.
and they are trying to figure out this whole retirement planning thing
Got it.
with a pension.
Okay, so what's their story? What makes them so interesting?
Well, Steve, he has this pretty substantial pension,
Okay.
but they also want to maintain their lifestyle, in retirement.
Yeah.
And that's
makes sense.
it's a pretty common goal. So it'll be interesting to see how they navigate all of this.
Yeah, definitely. Especially with the tax implications and everything. Okay, so let's dive into their situation a little bit more. What kind of pension are we talking about here?
Steve has an $80,000 annual pension. And here's the kicker. There's no lump sum option.
Oh, wow.
So he's getting that $80,000 every year.
Okay, so based on what we talked about earlier, that pretty much rules out the 0% tax bracket for them.
Right, pretty much.
It seems like they're starting from a point where taxes are going to be a big factor in their plan.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And to make things even more interesting, on top of that $80,000 pension, they're also going to get like $36,000 in Social Security benefits every year.
Combined.
Combined, yeah.
Okay.
So just based on those two things alone, they're looking at a potential 22% tax bracket
Wow.
or higher, if those tax rates decide to go up.
Yikes. Okay, so that's a big chunk of their income
Yeah.
going towards taxes.
Right.
Do they have any other assets that they can use to maybe offset that?
They do.
Okay.
They've got about $300,000 in traditional IRAs.
Okay.
And then they have another $200,000 in taxable mutual funds.
Okay.
So they've got a bit of a mix there.
Yeah, tax deferred and taxable assets.
Yeah.
So how does the book suggest they kind of leverage that?
Well, this is where the book's approach gets really strategic. They basically recommend shifting assets to tax-free options as much as possible.
Right. We talked about that earlier with the Roth IRA.
Exactly.
What other options are there?
There's something called a life insurance retirement plan.
Okay. ORRP?
Yeah, RRP.
I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, it's one of those things that can get a little complicated. Roth IRAs, they're pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
There are clear contribution limits, income restrictions, but LIRPs, those are more like specialized life insurance products. You really got to understand how they work.
It sounds like they might be more for specific situations then.
Yeah.
Not everyone.
Right, and it's really important to talk to a financial advisor who knows about these things
Yeah.
before making any decisions.
To see if it's a good fit. Makes sense. Okay. So, back to the Johnsons. How does the book recommend they go about shifting these assets? Because wouldn't that trigger a huge tax bill if they start moving money out of their traditional IRA?
Yeah, that's a good point. But the book addresses that. It says to use the taxable mutual funds to cover the taxes
Oh, that's smart.
from the shift.
So they're essentially using assets that are already being taxed
Right.
to kind of unlock the potential of their tax-deferred IRA funds.
Exactly. It's like a strategic move.
That's really clever. And it shows how important it is to have a diverse portfolio.
Right. Yeah, it's all about having different types of assets that you can leverage.
Okay, so it sounds like they're on the right track with this plan, but is there anything else they should be thinking about? Anything the book mentions?
Well, the book brings up another important point that a lot of people forget about: long-term care costs.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I mean, long-term care can really throw a wrench in your plans if you're not prepared.
Absolutely. And the book really stresses how those costs can impact your retirement, no matter how well you've planned everything else.
Yeah. It's definitely something we should talk more about. So how did the Johnsons factor into that? Do they have any long-term care concerns?
Well, in their case, most of their assets are in Steve's name.
Okay.
So if he needed long-term care, those assets would be used to pay for it,
Right.
which could potentially leave Jennifer with a lot less.
Oh, wow. That's a tough situation.
Yeah. A lot of couples don't think about that.
Yeah, it's not something that's always on your radar. So does the book offer any solutions?
It does. This is where the LRP we talked about comes in.
Okay.
It suggests that SCAVE put a portion of the money they're shifting each year into a LRR. So let's say $20,000.
Okay.
That way, it can potentially grow tax-free and be there if he needs it for long-term care.
So the ORRP is like a 2-for-1 deal.
Right.
it helps with long-term care, and provides tax-free growth. I'm starting to see why it's so appealing. What about the rest of the money? The money that's not going into the LARP?
Well, the book recommends converting that to a Roth IRA every year.
Got it.
So they are basically splitting their strategy between the two.
Yeah. I mean, this case study is a really good example of how to approach a complex financial situation.
It is, and it shows that even if you can't get that 0% tax bracket because of your pension, there's still things you can do
Right.
to minimize your taxes.
To be smart about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really reassuring, especially for listeners who might be feeling overwhelmed by all of this. It seems like there are solutions out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You just got to find the right strategy for you.
Right. And it all starts with understanding your situation.
That's the first step.
Okay. Well, this has been super helpful.
Yeah.
I'm learning a lot. I'm sure our listeners are too. But we're just getting started.
We are, yeah.
There's a lot more to unpack here. So stay tuned, everyone. We'll be right back after a quick break.
So it's interesting, right? The Johnson story, it really makes you think about, like, not just understanding your financials, but also those future needs, like the potential for long-term care. It's not something we talk about every day, but it's obviously super important for a secure retirement.
Yeah, it's one of those things that can easily get overlooked. People get caught up in the immediate stuff, how much to save, investments. But as we've seen, thinking about long-term care can really change your whole approach.
Yeah, it makes you realize that retirement planning isn't just about numbers. It's about, like, creating a plan that takes care of your well-being in the long run, too.
Right, exactly. And it kind of brings us back to something we mentioned earlier, diversifying your income in retirement. Pensions are great, but having those other sources like Social Security, investments, maybe even a part-time gig, it gives you a safety net and more control.
So you're saying that having multiple streams of income can actually help you deal with the whole tax situation in retirement?
Oh, for sure. It's like building a balanced income portfolio. You're not relying too heavily on one thing, especially something like a pension with those fixed tax implications.
I see. So it's almost like a mindset shift then. Instead of seeing retirement as this, like, stagnant period, we should be thinking of it as this dynamic phase where things might change.
Exactly. It's about being flexible, and adjusting your plan as you go.
I like that. Retirement as an ongoing journey, not just a destination. It's more empowering somehow.
It is. It's a healthier way to look at it, I think. But being adaptable also means staying informed, right? Tax laws change, the economy, even your own situation.
So how do our listeners stay ahead of those changes and make sure their retirement plan stays relevant?
Well, a couple things. First, check the IRS website regularly. They have all the latest info on tax brackets, contribution limits, any new rules.
Oh, right, the IRS website. I always forget that could be a good resource.
It is, really. Also, stay up to date on financial news. There are tons of publications and websites with good info.
So basically, stay curious and keep learning.
Yeah, exactly. And don't underestimate the power of just talking to people. Friends, family, anyone who's going through retirement or even thinking about it.
Oh, that's a good point. Sharing experiences is so valuable. It's like a financial support group. Everyone can benefit.
Exactly. You might get new ideas, find new resources just by talking to people.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. We've gone from those pension challenges to real-life strategies with the Johnsons, and now to this idea of retirement as a dynamic journey. It's been quite a ride.
It has, and it all comes back to that one key message. Knowledge is power. The more you understand about taxes, retirement income, those strategies, the better equipped you'll be to make good decisions.
That's a great way to put it. It's about taking control of your financial future and not letting the complexity scare you. And remember, while this deep dive has been super helpful, it's always best to get personalized advice from a qualified professional, right?
Absolutely. One size doesn't fit all when it comes to retirement.
Right. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the deep dive. And to our listeners, keep exploring this topic. Take those proactive steps to build the retirement you want.
That's right. You've got this.
Thinking about the Johnsons and their situation, it really highlights how important it is to not just understand your financial situation, but also to anticipate future needs, like those potential long-term care expenses.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it's not something that comes up in everyday conversation,
Not really.
but it's clearly a critical part of planning for a secure retirement.
Absolutely. It's one of those things that can easily get overshadowed,
Yeah.
when you're thinking about retirement planning.
Right.
You get caught up in those more immediate concerns, like, okay, how much money do I need to save?
Right.
What's my investment strategy?
Where should I invest? Yeah.
Exactly. But as we saw with the Johnsons, Factoring in those potential long-term care costs, it can really reshape your whole approach.
It really makes you realize that retirement planning is not just about crunching numbers and picking investments. It's about creating a plan that addresses, like, your overall well-being in the long run, too.
Right. It's about having a holistic view, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
thinking about all the different pieces of the puzzle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it brings us back to that idea we talked about earlier about diversifying your income sources in retirement.
Right.
Pensions are great, but having those other sources like Social Security, investment income, maybe even a part-time job, it gives you more control, a safety net, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's all about creating that balance, right?
Yeah.
In your income portfolio, you don't want to be overly reliant on any one source, especially something like a pension, which, has those fixed tax implications.
So are you saying that having multiple streams of income could actually help you navigate, like, all the complexities of taxes in retirement?
Absolutely. Yeah. It gives you more flexibility, more options.
It sounds like we're talking about a real mindset shift here.
Yeah.
Instead of viewing retirement as this period of financial stagnancy, we should be thinking of it as a dynamic phase of life
Exactly.
where our income sources might evolve and our needs might change.
Right. And being adaptable, being open to adjusting your plans as you go along. That's key.
I love that idea of retirement being an ongoing journey rather than just a fixed destination.
Yeah.
It feels much more empowering, and less intimidating, I think, for a lot of people.
It is. It takes some of the pressure off,
Yeah, right, right. But it's important to remember, right? Being adaptable also means staying informed.
Oh, absolutely.
Tax laws change, the economy fluctuates, and our personal circumstances, they change all the time.
All the time, yeah.
So how can our listeners stay on top of those potential changes and make sure their retirement plan stays relevant and effective?
Well, there are a few things you can do. First, make it a habit to check the IRS website, every once in a while. They have all the up-to-date information on tax brackets, contribution limits, those kinds of things, any new rules that come out.
Oh, right. The IRS website. It's a great resource that people forget about.
Yeah, it really is. And then another thing is to stay engaged with, reputable financial publications, websites.
Okay.
They often have really good insights into tax law changes, retirement planning trends, things like that.
So it's all about staying curious and informed.
Exactly. Keep learning, keep asking questions.
Yeah.
And don't underestimate the power of conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Talk to your friends, family members, colleagues, anyone who's either navigating retirement right now,
Okay.
or even those who are just starting to think about it.
I love that. Sharing those experiences, learning from each other, it's so valuable.
It really is. You can get so many great ideas just by talking to people.
Well, this whole conversation has been incredibly insightful.
It has been.
We started by exploring those challenges pensions pose to achieving the 0% tax bracket. Then we dove into real-life strategies with the Johnsons. And now we're talking about embracing retirement as this dynamic phase of life. It's been quite a journey.
It has been a journey, and I think it highlights a really important message. Knowledge is power. The more you know about taxes, retirement income sources, the different strategies that are available, the better equipped you'll be to make those informed decisions that align with your goals.
That's a great message to end on. It's all about taking control of your financial future and not letting the complexity overwhelm you. And remember, everyone, while this deep dive has provided some really valuable information, it's always best to seek personalized advice from a qualified financial professional.
Absolutely.
Someone who can help you create a plan that's tailored to your unique circumstances.
Right, because there's no one-size-fits-all approach to retirement planning.
Exactly. So thank you so much for joining us on the deep dive. And to our listeners, we encourage you to continue exploring this topic and take those proactive steps towards building the retirement that you envision for yourselves.
That's right. It's your future. Take charge.